so we're just going to proceed as we should have before, as normal. Okay. Right.
So for the 10-minute recess for nothing.
That's correct. Just dot I's and cross the T's for all group.
Okay. I'm sure.
Yes, so this application is an application for an occasional licence. You will find it included in the agenda along with a representation from the LSO which seeks to add further conditions. The applicant is unable to attend today due to care and responsibilities and has indicated that they're happy for the application to be heard in their absence. However, if the board are minded to refuse the application, she's requested that they defer the decision, to allow her to attend the next hearing, if that's the board's grace. But yes, so that's everything for this particular item, and I'll hand over to Mr. Fair.
Mr. Fair.
Yes, good morning. So there's a lot going on in the background with this premises. There's an application obviously for an occasional licence for a 14-day period, which is the maximum allowed in an occasional licence. And the occasional licence application is to facilitate an outdoor drinking area, pavement cafe type outdoor drinking area to the front of the premises, which encroaches on the public footpath and is the full width of the frontage of the premises and extends from the front face of the building for a distance of 2 metres away from the building. Clackmannanshire Council Roads Department have confirmed that they have approval for the use of that area for the purposes of a street cafe, and I think they may well be currently using it, but for no alcohol sales. The application for the occasional licence seeks to allow alcohol to be consumed in that area. The application is set in advance. Obviously, it's came in relatively suddenly as a result of the sun making an appearance in Scotland, something that we know is fairly rare, and it predates an application that's coming for a permanent non-minor variation to facilitate the same pavement cafe area. You'll note that the application is dated for the period of the 1st to the 15th of May 2025, a period that is now well past, and because of the short lead-in time I had for that application, I made inquiries with the clerk, and the clerk was in agreement that it would be appropriate if you decided today to grant the application, that it's granted with a change of date from the period of 14 days from today. I would further ask that if you do choose to grant the licence today with or without any conditions that are suggested, and I'll move on to that shortly, that you also grant authority today to grant future applications that are identical in the same terms under delegated powers to allow us to process these applications with Liz Shaw in the process and Liz Ann process these applications without the need for them to come back to the licensing board. And that would allow the applicant to have a period of continuous trade up until the variation is heard by the licensing board. That has a great deal of benefits in that we get advance notice of how well or otherwise the pavement cafe is working, if there's any concerns being raised, and we would have that information in advance of the licensing board being asked to make a decision to determine a full application for a permanent fixture of a pavement cafe outside this premises. So for me it's quite a useful thing to be able to try before you buy, if you like, allow the outdoor area to trade and see if it has any impact on those around about. And of course, once it's to identify whether or not the operator of the venue is able and responsible enough to comply with any suggested conditions that are granted. I don't have any real concerns. Ms McCraig, who is acting as an agent for the licence holder with authority of the premises licence holder, has been the long-term tenant of the premises for many years. And she's confirmed that the area will be restricted to 2 tables of 6 seats, and that it's unlikely that standing drinkers will be permitted to occupy the licensed space. That's her indication. I would suggest that a condition is applied to ensure that standing drinkers are not permitted to occupy the standing space. The committee, I'm sure the board I'm sure by now will have had time to read through the list of the list of proposed conditions, and you can see from the image what the area will look like. I have some minor concerns that the type of benches that are in place there are not going to be readily stowed away in accordance with a suggested condition that I've made. However, other outdoor drinking areas that we have in Clackmannanshire have all successfully operated on the basis that the street furniture used was removed prior to 10 o'clock each night and stored away somewhere safely. If that condition is granted, they will simply have to find a way to manage that condition. For me, it's necessary and expedient for the purposes of the licensing objectives that street furniture is removed each night. I can't see any way that can be safely left out there without risking the licensing objectives in terms of it being used after 10 o'clock, the temptation to take alcohol from the premises to the outside area once it gets dark. And all I don't think I need to go into great detail to explain where my concerns are coming with these benches remaining out 24/7. So I think one of the conditions I suggested is that the street furniture is removed each night by no later than 10 p.m. The use of the outdoor drinking area, again, where it's a public footpath, the licensing policy and decisions made by the licensing board historically since I've been here are all that it will not be allowed after 10 p.m. or allowed into the period of darkness in most cases. I think we won't have any difficulty with that in terms of the occasional licences, because they're not likely to extend beyond the period of darkness, and of course any full variation will be subject to a different report and a different set of conditions. So I think the board may have some questions. I don't have anything to add other than I would suggest that the conditions in Appendix A are an extract from the statement of licensing policy with some very, very slight amendments to fit the specific nature of this business, and that they are all potentially necessary and expedient for the purposes of licensing objectives and for managing outdoor areas, particularly those that are adjacent to public footpaths. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I'm going to start off by saying yes, I do have a couple of questions. One is on regarding supervision. On Appendix A, you're saying that all areas should be supervised. Do you know how that's going to be done?
So, in terms of supervision, the area is immediately outside the front door of the premises and I suppose no more than 10 or 15 feet away from the bar. The bar's not very wide at that point. You walk into the bar. In fact, if you look at the image in the photograph, the door's closed, sorry. I thought the door was open in the picture. There's glass windows along the front, the blinds are open, so from every area in the bar, you can see the majority of that outdoor area. With the doors open to the bar staff standing at the corner where they tend to stand will be able to see quite a portion of that area. And it will be expressed upon them that regular supervision means going out, collecting empty glasses, making sure that there's nobody standing drinking, making sure that there's nobody that's appeared there that's joined through the barrier with their own alcohol, the type of things that may go on and create risks that we don't want to take on. So the operator of the business is, I think I would describe a robust operator in terms of the standards of behaviour that she allows, and as a result of that, we don't have, we've had very, very few complaints over the years about the conduct of patrons in or around the premises. So I can only suggest that if there's a condition there that says that the area needs to be supervised, that's on the operator to manage. And of course, if this is granted with these conditions, the licence copy will be sent to the premises licence holder, who's a remote company that operates in Perth. And they will not want, they hold other licences as well. They wouldn't want to risk reputational damage on their other premises by a finding being potentially made because they failed to comply with conditions in this area as well. So I'm sure they would oversee that.
Okay. My second question is regarding the seating that's proposed outside the building. You touched on it yourself when you said there about storing the furniture away after 10 p.m. Do they have the facility to store that furniture? And B, if they don't, doesn't that breach your condition?
Indeed, if there's a condition put on the occasional licence that confirms that the furniture needs to be removed at 10 o'clock every night, or no later than 10 o'clock every night, and they don't do that, indeed they would be in breach. There is, of course, a difficulty that board members will be aware of for years and years of hearing it from me, that once an occasional licence is granted, it is granted. There's very little recourse to do anything about it. However, the impact of a breaching conditions of the occasional licence could be significant when it comes to having a permanent variation application considered. And I make it very clear to the operator that that impact exists, that if this is a test in advance of the full application should it be granted to me. I would suggest, looking at the images, those particular benches are not going to be suitable for their purposes. I can't see how those look like pretty standard heavy wooden garden benches, pub benches that have been painted, and I mean, no doubt that the staff that will be on at 10 o'clock at night are not lifting those anywhere on their own and putting them away somewhere. I do think they have suitable storage facilities for a different design of table and chair. And that's something that they will have to address before they start operating, at risk of not being able to operate the outdoor area. Because for me, I think the nature of the area allowing the street furniture that's proposed to remain out is not a good idea in terms of the licensing objectives. They may simply just have to spend money to change the way that is. Now, you also notice that one of the conditions that I've suggested are necessary, and it's been imposed on almost every other outdoor area in our hand, is some sort of barrier system. I understand, although that's not shown in the image, that is available when it's some brewery sponsored sort of standard airport barrier type system that's available to them should they be granted the area. The matter is in the hands of the licensing board. If they grant it with conditions that these furnishings are removed at night, then they have no choice but to remove those furnishings. And I would feel relatively certain that Scotland have an interest in all licensed premises in the area, particularly new outdoor areas. I would imagine that they'll monitor this over the weekend to see how it is operating as part of their weekend policing plan. And it's an element of guesswork, but I suspect that it will be monitored. And if those benches are not out, I would imagine that by Monday morning I'll know about it. After the weekend, and then we can address what happens next. I have the facility to serve notices that would prevent further sales of alcohol in the outdoor area until they have a system in place that makes it removable even during the period of the occasional licence.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's not got a licence to sell alcohol, so obviously we've got a picture of those tables, so what's happening just now?
They have permission. They have permission from the Roads Department to operate a street cafe, and they have the permission to occupy the land for the purpose of a street cafe. I suppose what's happening just now is they're allowing the smokers to sit there and they're allowing soft drinks to be consumed there. If that's the case, I've certainly passed that a couple of times and I've not seen any indication that there's anybody sitting at those tables with alcohol. As you know, I don't live that far away and I pass through Clackmannanshire and Clackmannan fairly frequently. You know, and I've not seen any evidence of doing anything untoward, and I'm also aware that Post Scotland have visited whilst these tables have been outside, and not found any evidence of anything concerning at this time.
So do we know what the roads team say? Because obviously it's saying for a road, for a street cafe, obviously I would say alcohol would that be classed as a cafe? It's a bar. Is there any difference? Would they have to then seek additional permission from the roads department for that?
No, there's no difference in the roads department. The roads team that provide the consent is basically a consent to occupy for the service of food and drink. It doesn't specify any difference whether it's alcohol or non-alcoholic. It's just a consent to occupy for the service of food and drink. So it would change nothing for the roads department. All the street cafes that we have in the area would be entitled, if they were licensed, to sell alcohol in them without any further consent from roads.
I want to kick off first of all saying in general in favour of the outdoor. I'm generally in favour of the outdoor sort of cafe culture, but there's a couple of issues regarding this. One, in looking at the photograph, I see at least 4 cones there in another basket, so I would be looking at some way of trying to ensure that they provide some sort of log storage facility as a condition. Presumably that's out there because they can't put it in within the bar. I think the condition for them to remove the seating sounds a bit onerous to me after 10 o'clock at night, but I don't know how they're operating at the moment. And did the applicant not make a request to us that we defer the decision until she's had an opportunity to chat through some of these issues with us? So I like the idea of a pilot. It's just how we enable that. And as Councillor Lowe has highlighted, if it's operating reasonably well at the moment without incident, I don't know how long it is, if it's been from the 1st of May. But it doesn't sound as if any issue's been drawn to the police's attention. We need to work around how it's been operating at the moment and how we as a licensing board handle it in terms of conditions. I also wouldn't actually, and as the evenings get late, have any problem with people going out till 10 o'clock at night sitting outside, because that's part of the cafe culture. But so there's a lot of issues being raised in my mind, and I'd certainly like to see the board discuss those with the applicant in a kind of iterative way, but I'd be interested in your feedback to some of those issues, Paul.
I think the suggestion from the applicant is that she would be happy to address the board with any concerns that you have in the event that you have reached a decision where you're satisfied that one of the grounds for refusal exists and that you're considering refusing the application. So you would have to be at a state to refuse the application, and I'm sure the clerk will verify this, but to refuse an application you'd have to be satisfied that a ground for refusal in the statutory term existed. If you're not satisfied that a ground for refusal exists, you must grant the application, or grant the application, of course, with conditions is the option. The condition about removal of street furniture is very much a matter at the hands of the board. The board decide that they are satisfied because of the width and size of the pavement that you don't think there's any need to remove the street furniture, then that is a matter for the board. And it may well be that the board are satisfied that those benches are perfectly suitable and could remain out 24/7. Obviously, we're still in use. From a licensing point of view, we don't have any street-facing outdoor drinking areas anywhere in Clackmannanshire that don't have a condition requiring the removal of the furniture, but this may be significantly different in the board's view. Each case should obviously be considered on its own individual merits, and the applicant, the operator of the premises, would be happy to address you on concerns if those concerns reach the level that they would create a ground for refusal. Otherwise, I can only reiterate the discussions that I've had with her, and these have gone on for quite some time. She's been at this for trying to get this area licensed outside for well over a year, and it could be as long as 2 years, but she has struggled to get the licence holder to move on it. Her arrangement is just a tenant. The licence holder is the only one that can make the application for the permanent variation that's been done some time ago. I've spoke to our roads department at length about it. They don't apply any conditions about furniture removal on that. Once they grant the consent to occupy, they are happy that it is the responsibility of the occupier that they've granted the consent to manage the premises and the area that they've been given the consent to occupy. They have no further concerns other than reacting to complaints. One would assume the fact that certainly spoke to roads quite recently, and they suggested that there had been no complaints for them to react to either.
But do you know whether they remove those picnic benches at the moment, or whether they're just sitting out there for that? You said they've been in place from the 1st of May to the 15th, so...
I think they've been there. I think the benches may well have been there longer from when they got their occupation consent. The application for the alcohol licence was only more recent. And looking at those benches, Councillor, with the greatest respect, I would suggest I'm not a betting man. Well, I'm a bit of a betting man, but I would bet that they're not being removed on a daily basis. I would be very surprised that if they have moved since they were placed there several weeks ago.
That was very much my assumption, Paul, so that's why I was thinking if we put a condition on about removing each night, just be seen as onerous. So the key issue for me is the time period we're talking about, and I don't like all that gubbins that's kicking around. I think if that's left out overnight, I think that's a risk. So but I wouldn't have any problem with them having a wee locked cabinet to put those clothes and stuff in. But that's a kind of management thing. But I do think as a licensing board we ought to think about that. Particularly if there was some individual under the influence that would do all sorts of things with traffic constantly. So I think there's a wee risk there in terms of how that area's been managed. And we need to consider that as a licensing board.
Yeah.
Can I ask, so could we move to referral if we want to speak to the applicant? I take it that would be reasonable grounds to defer. I just wanting to check that is, if we did take that decision to defer it, that is reasonable. Because I know obviously the licensing officers said if we were to refuse it, the things, but I'm going for if we were to defer it for comment from the applicant.
Yeah, if you're, sorry, yes, that is an option if that was your all agreement. You can defer it to have that applicant appear at the next hearing to speak to it, if that's what you decide to do.
Sorry, can I maybe say something on that matter? Of course, it's an option, as the clerk has correctly explained. The difficulty we have, of course, is that the applicant today has sought an excusal from the proceedings because she is a terminally ill relative. And knowing the applicant very well, she's been in the premises for the 17 years that I've been here. It's very unlikely that any deferral will make her any more available in the near future. So I'm not sure what you would, again, this is just my opinion and approach on the matter. I'm not sure what benefit you would gain from a referral, from a deferral to hear from her. I'm not sure she would be any more available to attend the proceedings. However, it's very much a matter that's in the hands of the board, if they're seeking to have specific questions from the applicant answered. As I said, the code not certain that the cones are anything to do with this application. I think the cones are just coincidentally there. Those cones, if they are even part of the application, if they are currently being used to define the licensed area, I guarantee that they're gone, because she's got barriers arranged that will be a clear delineation of the area, and the barriers won't be getting left out. Neither would I expect that the umbrellas will get left out. I think the window boxes have been there for years without any difficulty. So, you know, it would literally be, as the boards of the mind, the benches that remained outside overnight if they don't impose any sort of condition. I would just, you know, knowing the conversation that I've had with Andrea in relation to the application, I think she would have difficulty coming along. She may well be able to prepare something in writing with some assistance from the licence holder to answer any specific queries or questions you have. But would that be, if you were considering that, would that be going to the next licensing board? And I think potentially the next licensing board may see the full application before for the permanent variation. And of course that would come before you anyway, because it's a non-minor variation and you would have the opportunity to speak then.
Can you remind me, Paul, what's the period that, of this pilot that we're talking about? Is it from the 5th, well, it's the 20th now, is it to the end of May, or is it in June, July, or what period was she seeking in terms of having this outdoor cafe drinking element?
Well, if the application is granted today, it will be granted for 14 days from tomorrow. Right. And there may well be a requirement for a second, hence the reason I've asked the question about whether or not you'd be willing to approve a second application for an identical situation to be granted under delegated powers rather than bring it back before the board. There may be a second application that comes in almost immediately, which we would do our very best to process before the end of the first application. The next licensing board is scheduled for sometime in mid-June, I would expect, and it's very likely that the application, well, we don't have a complete application like it's possible that that application won't come to us in time for the next licensing board. So she may be seeking to trade on back-to-back occasional licences for the summer period, because that would take us into the recess period. Although, if an application for a variation comes in, we've got an obligation to deal with that in certain time. So, 24th of June. It's not impossible if we got an application this week that would be able to go to the next application, the next licence board. But we couldn't guarantee that. It would rely very much on a competent application coming in, there being no objections or representations made at the last minute from either Police Scotland or members of the public. Because it would require a site notice for a 21-day period as well, so we could be really tight.
In summary, I would have no problem, me personally, moving approval for 15 days pilot and a subsequent renewal for a further 15 days if there was no obvious problems related to officers. I would like to see conditions applied in terms of demarcating the area, which you've indicated the applicant's already considered. And I would also suggest that we try and ensure that there's no other. I'm just looking at all that gubbins round about. Doesn't look good, and it's kind of a risk there from a management point of view. So I don't know how you would term that conditions that the drinking areas free from obstruction or something like that, or the benches are free from obstruction, something along those sort of lines. And I wouldn't put in the condition, I think it's a bit onerous on them to remove them at 10 o'clock. It's the kind of risk in the pilot. So it's a bit long-winded, but that's how I would move this application.
Well, I think if it helps, the the operator of the business and the premises licence holder and premises manager would be obliged to ensure that public safety is protected, and I'm more than happy to have that discussion about the governance. I'll find a different way to describe it, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I can see where the concerns are raised, the traffic codes, the other stuff that's lying about. I'm more than happy to have that conversation, and I feel quite certain that I can be persuasive enough to ensure that those concerns are removed on the basis that they would be obliged to ensure the area was safe for use anyway.
You happy with that, John?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that with the conditions that I suggested. I don't know if I can second them.
And that's with the removal of condition number 15 that talks about removing the street functions.
So can I just clarify, the street furniture and every other licence we've granted for street cafes, we ask them to remove that furniture, is that correct?
I want to say 100% yes, because at this moment in time I can't think of any that condition hasn't been put on. But there's certainly none that leave it out. If, you know, whether there's a condition there or not, there's none that leave it out. The only one I think it potentially doesn't have that condition is the Inn at Tullibody, which has got that huge space out the front. But they don't leave the furnishings out anyway. The reason they may not have that condition is they've had their outside drinking area predating when they developed this particular set of conditions.
Right.
And in the absence of a variation application coming in, we have the opportunity to amend the conditions. It may well be that they don't have that specific condition, but neither they nor the Abercrombie Arms, which may well be in the same position as well, neither of those two premises leave the stuff out overnight. In fact, I don't think the Abercrombie Arms uses the area anymore. I think they used it during COVID, but don't anymore. Bristol Kitchen, the Bristol Bar, and Dawn both remove their functions at night as part of the conditions. Wetherspoons and the area in front, they remove the stuff at night when they have it. So I'm not aware of anybody, I'm trying to think of anybody else that's got an outdoor area at the front of the premises. The Peppies, I suppose, but that's in a permanently fenced area, so they actually open that land as they encroach on the public footpath. I'm just thinking of the ones that encroach on the public footpath, and I'm not aware of anybody leaving it out, whether they've all got a condition. The two Tullibody ones probably don't with hindsight. I don't even have my laptop, so I could be guaranteed to check. But again, that stretch of footpath is quite wide. The roads authority in that area, when they looked at it, had no concerns whatsoever about the consent. And the consent, the tables and chairs have perhaps been there 24 hours a day for the last 4 or 5 weeks, and I've had, there's no complaints or concerns about it being brought to my attention.
Yeah, and obviously if there was any complaints or any issues arising from this pilot, we could discuss them in greater detail and receive the full application. Yeah, so I've no real issue seconding the motion from Councillor Rosilli on that basis.
Okay. Just be proposed that we have a pilot period of Durham usage 2 weeks.
2 weeks, 15 days, I think. This was applicant.
Yes, under this licence, 14 days are the maximum.
Right, 14 days.
And it's been seconded by Councillor Green.
Second.
Fiona, do you have any comment?
I disagree and I would have moved for a deferral, but
Do you want to go to it?
I'm actually going to agree to the pilot. There hasn't been any comments made about any unruly behaviour in connection with this, with the outdoor drinking. I see no reason to get to the moment, but let's have a look at the pilot. Let's see how the pilot goes and then we can take it from there. However, if there have been any complaints, of course, it will be a kind of great part of the board. following, well, we're not all in favour of this, it's a minority, I believe.
So just for the avoidance of doubt, we have Councillor Lee, Chair Councillor Lyell and Councillor Basiley in agreement to grant the occasional licence application here today. Is that correct?
Agree.
Yep, the conditions.
Yeah, subject to the conditions.
That's with the conditions of our number 15, which requires the removal of the street furniture. If I helps as well, the other matter that we've raised the question of in terms of the future applications being granted under delegated powers, I wouldn't be satisfied that Sean was granting them under delegated powers had there been any complaints. I don't think Sean would be comfortable with the idea either. So I guarantee if there's any complaints and any concerns raised, that maybe the future occasional licences would come to the board. And for the benefit of Councillor, if there's any specific questions or concerns that you have, I'm happy to take them up direct with both the licence holder and the site operator to get answers for you. And with the decision that's been made today, I'm more than happy to raise anything with them. The licence holder is certainly very amenable to communication. The site operator has never not done anything I've asked her to do in 17 years. So I think, if there's something that's worrying you or something that is concerns, or you're just needing some further explanation, I'm happy to obtain that for you with this forum to set your mind at it.
Okay. That concludes the business.